Sego, everybody, and Sego is the greeting. I'm here. We say Sego, si Sego Scano. I'm here, and I'm here in peace. Sego, si Sego Scano. I'm here in peace. So that's how I'm coming to you today. This is the 6th lecture in the series. And just to explain, in my live classes, this is the lecture we take a field trip to the Crawford Lake Conservation Area, not far from here, to see an actual longhouse village. The title of this lecture is Natural Architecture, the Origins of the Archetypal Longhouse, which means the longhouse when it consolidated into a form which we loved and had for 1,000 years. Now you remember we've been through creation, we have been through the longhouse as an expression of nature and the landscape as the first architecture, and then we've come into the Great Law, which is a complete revision of our culture, where we are taught to live not in a real longhouse, but in a metaphorical longhouse, which is the actual landscape where we live. It is a longhouse in the imagination, and that's our first conception of it. And then the peacemaker taught us how we live in that longhouse. Because there's a way, it's not just a matter of gathering into the longhouse and letting things happen as they will. Everything begins with thanksgiving. And he reiterated this as a fundamental teaching, thanksgiving. So when they do the recitation of the Great Law, which I described to you, it begins every day begins with thanksgiving around a sacred fire at sunrise. Not everybody comes, they don't want to get up at sunrise, but a few of us do, and we hear the Thanksgiving address. This was the instruction of Daganawida. Do the Thanksgiving. Next, as you remember, he put us in an order that we never had before. He named 50 chiefs among the 5 nations. 50 chiefs. He gave each of them their titles, one by one. And as I read to you in the last lecture, I read you some of their titles. And each title of a chief, it was carefully chosen by Daganawida to represent an archetype of decision-making and an identity for that chief. Sometimes it's beautiful and light, and sometimes it's very heavy. Sometimes it's very ambiguous. But as they sit around in the circle, wearing their gustos to identify their nations in order, they know their names. And standing behind the chief, the other thing Daganawida did, he set the women into clans, the clan mothers, and there were as many clan mothers as there were chiefs. And each clan mother was the head of a particular clan, let's say the Bear clan. How did Daganawida choose the first clan mothers? Well, we know the very first clan mother, who doesn't have an animal totem because she is the mother of mothers, Jagansisa. But the other clan mothers, he would go to them. He was naming the chiefs in the village and talking to them one by one. Then he goes to some of the women, and he would say to them, go to a single woman, because everything in Iroquois is one-on-one. When you were out today gathering water or berries or herbs, did an animal come to you? And the woman would say, oh yes, it was a deer. You are naturally the clan mother of the deer clan. The deer came to you, and the deer made the choice, and I'm confirming it. And you will, from now on, all of your relations will be in the deer clan. And when children are born in your clan, they take the clan, your clan, Not the men's clan. The man who impregnated you, no, it's not his child. It's your child, and it's the child of this clan, dear clan. So that was quite remarkable. We have the chiefs in order, and then we have the clan mothers. Now, surrounding those people, just to make it clear again, are what are called faith keepers, and they're the people who call the ceremonies by watching the star fields, and they watch over all of the scheduling, let's put it that way, of the activities of the clan and of the nation, the faith keepers. Then behind the chief directly is a sub-chief and a runner. Each chief has a runner because that was our form of communication. So when the chief had to deliver a message, let's say to another nation, he would send his runner to go to that village and give the message. And these runners were remarkable people in the sense they were profoundly fit, and they had to run without stopping. In other words, they had to carry their food with them. They couldn't stop morning or night until they reached their destination. So they were remarkable runners, as we are still today. One of the primary recreations at Six Nations today is running. And they have the children do it for fun. Just run. They would set up running races, and then they would set up running circuits, and often what we do today with the popularity of running in groups. And people are running in groups, they don't understand where it came from, but we do, because it's the inheritance of the runners which were deeply in our culture for 1,000 years. So we come to this part now, where everyone is going to come together again to build a longhouse. They've gone into remission because of the dystopic men. They stopped building the longhouse, and during the Great Law, the only thing that was left in our territory were some old longhouses left over from another period. There were no new longhouses. So after Daganawida came, we started building the longhouse again. And that's why this lecture is called Natural Architecture, the Origins of the Archetypal Longhouse. This is the core longhouse instruction and way of construction that we're going to enter now. So these lectures, this is number 6. They're moving along on a grand narrative, which you should try to notice, because they're not moving in a straight line. Even though I've made 6 distinct lectures up to this point, they're moving in a beautiful wave with fuzzy boundaries, moving through time, starting with creation and building up a beautiful story with lots of memory to bring us to this point 1,000 years ago. We're going to begin building a longhouse again. I'd like to go to the first slide. The natural architecture, the origins. This is another origin story of the archetypal longhouse. This is when the longhouse comes into being after Daganawida sets us into a social order which we never had before. And it needed to have a longhouse. He knew that, and he told us that metaphorically we live in a longhouse in the natural world, but that now we're going to build longhouses, and each of those houses will have a clan mother. And they'll have particular duties, and we'll call it, when they do the archaeology today, they looked for artifacts which might indicate which clan had the longhouse, because they will find a burial in the longhouse. For instance, if you're the bear clan, they will find a burial of a small cub bear. And they identify it, and they say, oh, wow, well, why would they bury this near the door? Because this is the Bear Clan house. So we're able to identify in archaeology some very interesting clues to and affirmations of what I'm teaching you right now. This is not something made up, but it's not part of the normal dialogue either around the study, the anthropological study of Iroquoians, because the anthropologists don't know this, and they can't surmise how we live because they don't think like we think. And so part of my hope is in the course is that I help you to think in the native mind, native science, native architecture, native lifestyle, native knowledge. It's all coming forward in the teachings here. And if you borrow them, which you should adopt them because you're in this homeland now. And it behooves you to adopt the customs of the people of the land you're visiting. This is something we have forgotten in the exigencies of modern travel. We travel everywhere, and it's all a big party. And, the tourists, especially American tourists, I'm told, they just look at the culture. Even when they visit great icons of Western culture, like Paris, they're just looking at it. They're not really absorbing what the place is, what the character of the French are, for instance, or the British when they're traveling, because they're not capable of it. And somehow they don't think they need to be capable of it. But I'm telling you, it's an absolute essential to living a respectful life on the earth without disturbing the beautiful order that we're given in the natural world. That's my understanding, and that's what my culture teaches, and what my lecture series is helping you to learn. And it can be learned. You can learn to be a respectful settler, a respectful guest in a new land. And every one of you, if you're not native, are a guest of the original peoples. So it behooves you to adopt what we have. And that way we won't have a conflict anymore. We'll have a beautiful, harmonious blending. Now, remember the idea of the horned snake? This is a picture of the serpent mounds in Ohio, very famous serpent mounds. They're very elaborate. I showed you what they look like in the landscape in the last lecture, but here is an attempt by anthropologists to take the bends in the path of the snake and point it toward astronomical events, like the rising and falling of the moon, or in the case I described to you, Venus, or the Pleiades. We know that these people are addressing the sky world in some way, and this is our almost futile attempt to give meaning to it, because we know that this squirming snake, the horned snake, is the leader of migration, and that all good people follow this horned snake in its winding path on a migratory event series, not unlike the way that the Israelites moved through the Holy Land. And they weren't allowed to stop in the most pleasant places. They had to keep going. And finally, Moses was told, your people have to keep going even though the Red Sea is here. So he taught Moses how to separate the Red Sea so that the Israelites could go to their true destination. We were just like that. We getting to our home, it was a circuitous path, but fortunately, we lived in a very benevolent place. Now, here, I'm showing a sumac bush woven within a woods. This is so important, the sumac. You'll see the title, Realm of the Sumac Field. Realm of the Sumac Field. This is a very sacred plant. And it's oftentimes treated like a weed. because it grows, it's so healthy and it spreads so quickly and people see it as a nuisance. But it's not an invasive plant. It is, it is an indigenous plant to this part of the world. And when you look at it through the landscape, and I'm helping you here with this red line, you see the top of the sumac bush. It rolls almost as if it's a building, stretching out. Or perhaps, a longhouse. Because this is the way the longhouses look in the landscape. They're not green, they're brown because they're covered in bark. However, the sumac is a living architectural realm. See, it's integrated within the forest landscape, referencing the covering of the sky and the line of the horizon. Very important to us that we're in a building that refers to the sky world and to the horizon, because that's the only thing that anchors us. We don't have measuring devices that would we could write down the position of things. We were dealing in a very fluid, intuitive way without all of those instruments to give ourselves context. We needed context, like every civilization needs it. And just because it's not done in the Western way does not mean it's not valid. In fact, it's much harder to carry this way of being in the world than it is the Western way, because it is so fluid and it is so intuitive. And there are no guarantees of whether it's right or wrong, except the way you experience it and the good life you live and the happiness that you end up with. That's how subtle the creation of the longhouse is. Here is the interior of a sumac bush with a path running through it. And if you'll notice, it's gorgeous. The dappled light, this is in summertime, following the path, it would keep you very cool in the heat. And there are little areas where you can sort of dip off and go to sleep, for instance, or bring a group of children down and teach them here. And we loved it because the sumac bush has branches which go up like this. They're like a deer horn, and they're even fuzzy like deer horns. So sometimes they call this the deer horn sumac. Very important to us because the deer horn is the antennae to the Creator. And we feel this is rendered now in the plant world the way it is on the deer. And oh, wow. So we made this a very important thing. Then here is the opening to that path. As you're walking in the woods, it's just a big, dark, deep hole in the side of the bush that invites you to go in. But, it's if I could say so, it's a little bit like the journey of the Hobbit. I mean, you've got mysterious doors to go into, and you don't know where it's going to lead you. Or you could say Alice in Wonderland, because that's another reference, the idea of wonderland. Where did that word come from, wonderland? Well, it was invented, and it was invented in different places at a certain historical moment in the late 19th century. Wonderland. Well, this is kind of one of those secret moments that you come across in the woods, and you go, wow, what an adventure. Let's go in. And it takes courage to go in. And when you go in, you're never the same. When you see that beautiful dappled light coming down, it's magical. Now, we didn't have the word magical, but we had a lot of spirit stories and what people today would call superstitions, because we believed in the spirits of the forest. In fact, we have the belief of the little people. And, the little people are running around in the forest. They're quite small. And, you have to put down tobacco for them. If you don't acknowledge them, they will trip you up. They won't work with you. And you'll have a bad experience in this sumac bush. maybe something will fall on your head. Maybe I've had friends at Six Nations. One friend of mine, Mike Dockstader, he has a PhD from Cornell. He was doing gardening and he got tripped by a little person and he had to put his leg in a cast. And he was so certain to me, oh, Bill, the little people got to me. I forgot to put down tobacco. And this is a graduate of Cornell University. And he's a very bright man and he's a very close friend of mine. And, you know, he just doesn't tell anybody about this because he's ashamed of it in a way, but he's going around in a cast because the little people tripped him. The little people were here for these people, too. The richness of Iroquoian culture is mind-boggling because there's so many aspects to it. And what I'm doing is giving you the superficial part with the entrance into the dark hole. Because you're going to go into that dark hole in this class. And you're going to be transformed by it. I don't know quite how we're going to do it, but that is my deep hope. And I'm asking the Creator for help to do it, because we're now in a virtual world. And I want to give you as rich an experience as I gave my students who, when we met live and we were at Crawford Lake. If you go to Crawford Lake, and we're going to see maybe if we could do one session from Crawford Lake virtually. I have to get special permission because it's closed to the public right now. But when you go into the longhouse at Crawford Lake, it's an exact reproduction of a Huron longhouse built on archaeological evidence. So they know the size, the width, everything. And there it is, and you go in. You go into a dark door at one end, and there's another door at the other end. That's all there is. And there are holes in the sky. And I'll tell you, it makes you hushed, like you're in a cathedral. You don't want to speak too loudly. And you want to observe because there are things happening around you. There are little animals in there. And sometimes there are big animals, like the dogs. The longhouse was the realm of the dog, if you want to know the truth. We still honor the dog as Six Nations above all animals. And we say that the dogs come out of the forest to be with you. And they'll actually choose you as their owner. Doesn't this sound like going to the dog at the SPCA and choosing an animal which has been abandoned? Oh, that one chose me. People say this constantly every day. Well, yes, the animals do choose you. And they want to be with you. And they're supposed to be your companion, like we have in Iroquois too, the friendship ceremony. Every person is supposed to have a friend. Do you know that? If you don't have a friend, you have to find one. And if you can't find one, we will find one for you. What is a friend? Friendship ceremony. I think the peacemaker gave us the friendship ceremony because he didn't want us to be alone. He had met Hiawatha in the forest. And Hiawatha was in mourning. He lost his entire family. And he wanted to die. He wanted to suicide. And that's when the peacemaker said, no, in the great law, no suicide. And we talk about it in the recitation for the great law, no suicide. It's one of the condolence strings, no suicide. Well, the peacemaker could see, that Hiawatha had good reason to want a suicide. He seemingly lost everything, but the peacemaker said, no, I have work for you. He said, I stutter. I have a double row of teeth. I can't speak to the nations when I go to visit them. So I need you to stand in front of me and speak the words I give you. And this is how we do it in ceremonies at Six Nations. When you're doing a recitation, let's say of the Thanksgiving, there's always someone sitting beside you, helping you, and actually feeding you the next steps or the pronunciation of the words for the next part of the Thanksgiving. And this is a replication of what Hiawatha did with what Daganawida did with Hiawatha. So there is the great law popping up again every day in the Longhouse. The beautiful relationship we have with our friend. Now, just to elaborate a little bit on this friendship ceremony, how important it is, your friend has to be of the same sex as you. So a woman has a friend who's a woman, and a man has a man as a friend. This friend, they say, is closer than a brother or sister. It's almost like a wedding in a way, but it's not like gay like we have, but it has tones of same-sex relationships. And we had it for 1,000 years. My chief used to tell me about this because he had a couple of friends, and his friends died, so he had to get a new friend. And I, in the end, became one of his last friends, his very last friend. And he knew I was close to him, and I'd be by him no matter what happened to him. And that's all he had to know. But what we do for the friendship ceremony is the friends are bonded together before the entire community. And one friend they have to exchange a bolt of cloth. Remember the Navajo ceremony I described to you, where I had to take a bolt of cloth to the elder? Well, in our culture, you take a bolt of cloth and you exchange it with your friend. And that is enough cloth to make a beautiful shirt like this one. And you do that in front of everybody, and then you sing to each other what we call your special song, the Odonwa. So here are these two men or two women singing to each other, exchanging cloth. It's very moving, the friendship ceremony. When it's over, there's a great feast. And those two are bonded. And we watch out, because if something happens to one or the other and the friend doesn't come, that's wrong. That friend has to go to the side of his friend. It's like godfather or godmother. No matter what happens, this is, I guess, a god friend. But we had it for 1,000 years, and we still practice it today. Beautiful. And it's a practice which would be very healing today in a world of broken relationship and lack of friends. No one should be lonely. No one. And that is the rule of the Great Law. No one will be left alone. So in our culture today, when a lot of people are left alone, quote, homeless or despondently abandoned, for whatever reason, it's not right. They must be put in order. And that order is so clear. They must have a friend bonded to them. Not just a therapist or some kind of social worker, but a real friend. I've gone through a lot of different therapy in my life, and I have a very clear notion about the qualities of a true therapist. On our faculty, we happen to have an extraordinary therapist, Andrew Levitt, who is not only a great teacher of architecture, but he's a great therapist. And Andrew's helped me a lot, when he's seen my life and what I'm going through. To help me, he's given me things to read, and he's loved me. And I'm very grateful to him because his friendship means so much to me. I won't call him my perfect friend, but he is a friend like no other. Another person on your faculty here, which has also been an extraordinary, perceptive, therapeutic presence in my life, Robert Jean Van Pelt, who is we've shared so much together because Robert Jean's journey to explicate Auschwitz and the Jewish destiny is unmatched in the world. And the duty that Robert Jean had to do this work was given to him by his mother. She is the one that recognized that he was the one to tell this story. And he secretly dedicates it all to her. Now, I don't know whether he tells his students this, but he's told me this, and I'm telling you because this kind of beautiful therapeutic relationship is all part of the Great Law. And it all takes place in the Longhouse. But before it takes place in the Longhouse, the black hole in the sumac bush. The inviting nowhere, out into the unknown. Remember the Great Law, the journey of Daganawida? He's going from the known into the unknown as he crosses Lake Ontario in the stone canoe. Amazing. Just amazing. The beautiful weaving of all of these events into one beautiful narrative that's all about who? You. It's all about you, everyone in this class. This story is about you. I wouldn't have believed it many years ago, but I do now. I used to feel that I was being taken care of, but I had no notion how until I went back to my native culture and was taught by a man who was a true wisdom keeper. And he said, "You're okay, Bill. You understand us." I said, "I do?" He says, "Absolutely." He would laugh. He says, "You don't understand that?" "I don't know, but I love you," I said. He said, "Well, you understand." And you know what a lot of people don't understand? I hate to tell you. I'm surrounded by people who don't understand it. But, you know, they still come to me. But he said, that is the fate of an elder. You've got to listen to everybody, right or wrong. He would say to me, you wouldn't believe the people that come to me for help. They have these hideous addictions, or they're, sexually warped, or they're, they have horrible stories they're telling me, and I don't know what to do with them except to listen to it and then to say goodbye. But it seems to help them to be able to tell somebody. And they figure they can trust me with, quote, their dark secrets. Here is the first dark secret. The great inviting void in the sumac bush. That is the metaphor for everything I'm saying to you right now. That is it. That is the first longhouse. And this is the landscape that it was in. The landscape of New York City is filled with waterfalls, as our world here in Southern Ontario is. We have, like, all of this landscape, Southern Ontario, New York State, is a paradise in many ways, by any measure. The beautiful waterfalls in Seneca Country, for instance, as we approach Niagara Falls, are breathtaking. You spend your life traveling and camping there, just as you can in Ontario. What a gift. I'm just saying that. What a gift. Now, the sky. This means everything on a dark night. Look up. What do you see? A cluster of stars that have been so fascinating for every culture on the planet. There are many different names for it. The Europeans call it Pleiades. And there is a whole sect of people called Pleiadians who believe in this esoteric idea that we all came from the Pleiades, and so they kind of worship them. The Pleiadians. It's almost kind of a quasi-religious group today. But we didn't have any of that mysticism. Well, we did. We thought that this was the hole through which Sky Woman fell. But it was other things too. Seven dancing brothers. And we have the story of the 7 dancing brothers who left their parents here to go to the sky world and to be entertained by the first ancestor up there. They were gifted by being adopted by the first ancestor, the one who rules over the sky world. This first ancestor, we haven't talked about ancestors because it's a very important concept. The first ancestor is the presence which existed before anything else. It's a bit like saying God, but what is God? God is infinite. And if something is infinite, it means there's nothing else. That's just it. It is. It is. Interestingly, in the Bible, when Moses met God, and he was asked to speak to his people the Ten Commandments, he said, "They're never going to listen to me because I'm very soft-spoken. If they ask me who sent me to give you the great law," God said, "Tell them, I am. I am has sent you. I am that I am." Boom. That's it. Well, that's the first ancestor. And we had that. There is nothing behind that first ancestor, because that is the isness of being. And that ancestor befriended the 7 dancing brothers, and they never went home. And they're still dancing in the sky with him. Now, we also call it the 7 sisters. And we have stories around that as well. So, we have 7 brothers, 7 sisters, the Pleiades. It's all consolidated. In a moment, we're looking up 1,000 years ago. It's the same view that people get today. So 1,000 years is the same as one day when it comes to the sky. Same with the water. When you look out across the water, every day I go down to Lake Ontario, I know that is the same view that people were seeing 1,000 years ago. And it makes me feel completely timeless. And I'm so grateful to have that feeling just once in the morning. That's the way our ancestors were. Their life was very rich. Rich with the natural life and with animals and with stars. Think about it. Incredible. And it's all consolidated. Here we have the landscape. The landscape, which was all white pine trees. And I was just reading an article about New England, the New England forest. Do you know that they've discovered in New England a white pine tree 210 feet tall? There's just one. And that's enough to make people believe that we were in a white pine forest filled with those trees. When you go to California and go to the Muir Woods, for instance, filled with sequoias, that's what it felt like here. But our sequoias were white pine. Think about it. And why don't we have them today? We all love pine wood because when we cut it, it smells wonderful. But where are all the pine trees? They were all cut down. They were cut down by Europeans for a very good reason. They were so tall and so straight and so strong, they used them to set their sails on their tall ships. And those tall ships went all over the world, taking the white pines of Iroquois with them. Can you imagine? These great ships, you see the stories of them, and the masts are held in place by Iroquois white pines. I don't hear that story told, but it is true. So just think about the influence that the Great Law has had on the entire world, that has been buried. And now what we're doing in this class is we're more or less like the drape in the longhouse, pulling the deerskin back and talking again. And that's this class, 12 architectures. Now, I am Lower Mohawk, and this is the valley of my ancestors. It's a contemporary photograph. It's called the Mohawk Valley. This is the heart of Mohawk territory with the two cliffs on either side. We call it the Big Nose and the Little Nose. Very old name. You can see that the New York State Thruway runs along one side of the river, and if you go a little farther down, you'll see the railroad. Everything runs in this valley, including the Erie Canal. Erie Canal, railroad, the river, the highway. Why? Because it's the only place that you can pass in New York State and not be in impenetrable mountainous areas. And this is a topographic map of what I'm describing for you with the names placed on it. And you'll start on the, right here, Glacial Lake, Albany. You know what that is? That is the Hudson River. Incredibly beautiful river that starts up in New Hampshire and comes down and lands right on the shores of Manhattan. Straight as a die almost. Right down. But on one side are the Adirondacks. And you can't, there's no highway running through the Adirondacks. They're too high, they're too steep. This is the ancient Mohawk hunting ground. Our territory went right up to Montreal and right down to here. Then you see what I described to you in the last slide, big nose, little nose. See that? And then as you come up here, there are little falls and the what they call the Ilian Gorge, the West Canada Creek. Canada. The word Canada appearing long before it was given to this country. The Trenton Falls. And here it is down in New York State, but Ganada, still Ganada. It's our village. And this is where my ancestors were from, called the Lower Mohawk. Oh, sorry, these are the Upper Mohawk. My ancestors came from this area here where you see the little and the big nose. So when I go down there, I try to remember my ancestors, but I'll tell you, there's none left. There is a small community of Mohawks down there that is run by a beautiful elder named Tom Porter. And Tom is originally from Akwesasne, up on the St. Lawrence. But he had this notion as a young man. He wanted to go and recover some of our territory because we're not there anymore. And through the grace of what should I call it? The spirits, someone gave Tom 800 acres right in the middle of our old territory. The 800 acres used to be a work farm for the mentally ill. But they used to have these farms where the patients all lived in a big house and they spent the whole day farming. And it was considered very healing. And, it was a very good practice. I don't know why we abandoned it, because now people who are mentally ill have no place to go and no purpose. Why shouldn't they go to the farm? Well, that's what people thought in the late 19th century. They built the house where Tom lives now and big barns. Now Tom has renamed it Ganatsoholage. And he has named it after one of these big holes in the rock face that collects water. It's called in translation, the place of the clean pot. Because that water was very pure groundwater, and people used to go down and gather it for the village. The place of the clean pot, Ganatsoholage. So that's what's there today. And that's really all I can visit to go back to my own ancestors. Here's another view. You see up at the top is the incredible Mohawk River. And then down here is a tributary of the river, a wetland. And then you have the highway running right down through it. And this is the highway that hundreds and thousands of people travel every day. It's the New York State Thruway. New York State has had a troubled relationship with the Iroquois people, going right back to the American Revolution. But they're starting to change, and what they have done is all along the New York State Thruway, they have plaques now describing the sites of our ancient villages, which their people destroyed 200 years ago in acts of genocide. And that's why we moved up here to Canada, to the Six Nations of the Grand River. The Finger Lakes, the Appalachian Plateau. The Finger Lakes, they're scraped out of the ground by the glaciers. So when the glaciers receded, they scrape these lakes into the landscape. It is stunning when you drive through there, because these lakes are very long, and they're very picturesque, and they're usually roadways running up and down either side of them. This is a particularly important one right here. It's called Lake Cayuga because right here at the bottom, you know what's at the bottom of Lake Cayuga? One of the great universities of the United States, Cornell. They have one of the finest architectural programs in the country. They've just been voted the best architecture school. But they are here in a wilderness at the bottom of Lake Cayuga. And when our people go down there, we remember this area of the lake is where the Cayugas used to gather their canoes. It's a beautiful inlet right here. And then they would travel up and down. They're called the Swampy Lake people because when you get up here, it's a wetland. So we call them the swampy waters people. It sounds derogatory, but they knew what it meant. And they carry it proudly even today, because when they say their name, in our language, it means the Swampy Lake people. Now, over here in this open area is the territory of the Central Fire, the Onondagas, Syracuse, New York. And then you go over here and you have this great lake, Oneida. This is the home of the Oneida people. We just came from here, the Mohawks. We come across here, and then we come into this area, which is huge, the Seneca territory. So this is a landscape I can't help but review again and again, because Daganoweda said, this is your first longhouse, this landscape. And each of those lakes is like a smoke hole in the landscape. And that's how you should cross it. When you cross that land, you're crossing the great longhouse of the Iroquoian people. And you are welcome at every fire now, because I've taught you how to sit under the great white pine tree and stop fighting. Simple as that. Now you can start building your beautiful longhouses that you're going to build. Yeah. Another, like the sumac bush, but on a tiny scale. Little nests that the mice make in the fields. And if you don't think this looks like a piece of contemporary architecture with the weaving of the grass, think again. You've seen buildings, including the Olympic Stadium in Beijing, that looks just like this, but rendered in steel. And it's not very nice in steel. Believe me, it's very contorted, and it takes a lot of steel to make a very simple structure. Unlike Buckminster Fuller, who wanted to do more with less, today we do more with lots more. And we call that sustainable architecture, or we call that biomorphic. That's not biomorphic. That's a hideous distortion of biomorphism. Biomorphism is light, very light, and effortless, like a little mouse nest. That's how our longhouses sat in the landscape, just like these nests here and there, all tied together, the wood tied together with organic material, not with bolts and stainless steel and all the other stuff they use today, which is a travesty and a waste, unsustainable. It's a waste of resources. I mean, it's beyond a waste of resources, like so much of what we do in the modern world. We are consumptive to a ridiculous level. We process and invent all sorts of things that don't need inventing. And the first longhouse was small. Small. It might have just housed 50 people, because we didn't know how to do the great longhouses yet. We didn't even feel we needed them. We started small. And this is a proper setting for a longhouse. It's in the forest. It's not in cleared land. We used to plant in the forest too. The Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash. And that's our little longhouse. Beautiful, poignant. Let's say that is the longhouse of the Snipe clan. All the Snipes are in there. Here again, another map. We can't have enough of these maps to confirm this territory. We see here in the Mohawk language, Ganyadario, Ontario. That's it in Mohawk. And here we have all of the nations in the native language. Ganyagahega, the people of the Flint. So we just go on and on. Seneca territory, Lake Erie, Gaguaro, Dalondo, Wendat. These are our Huron brothers. And this is the peacemaker was born right here. And he crossed the lake right here. And he was Wendat. Where are the Wendats today, I ask you? I don't know if anyone can answer the question. It'll be interesting during the class when I ask such a question if I get an answer. Where are the original Wendats? Here we have Montreal, Hochelaga. Here we have Quebec City, Strathcona. That's the true landscape of our area. The Wendats now live in Wendake, Quebec, outside of Quebec City. And you know why? Because they became Jesuit Christians, and they forgot our great law, and they even forgot all of their culture. And we Mohawks went up there to find out what was happening. And we gave them a choice. I hate to say it. I can't say it in public because I have said it in public in company of the Wendats, and I got my hand slapped. I said, no, we went up there to visit you, and you had Christianized. So we gave you a choice, die, or get out of here, or be adopted by us. And some of you did get adopted, and some of you ran away to Quebec City, where the Jesuits had their open arms for you as Reformed Christians. We thought it was a travesty. And there were two famous Jesuit priests up there, Brebeuf and Lalonde. We killed them. The Mohawks killed them. What they did, they made a big fire and they actually cooked them on the fire and then ripped their skin off them. They were later made saints of the Catholic Church. Brebeuf and Lalonde. And that's where they sit today as saints. But it's not right. It's not right because what they did, they destroyed the cohesiveness of Iroquois culture. And they did it all in the name of the church in Paris. And now they're, quote, heroes of thousands of people who go up there to get a healing at the Church of Saint Anne de Brebeuf. I went up there for various reasons, but I said, I want to go to that church, Saint Anne de Brebeuf, because the church is filled with crutches and braces and all sorts of things of people who were healed by the spirit of Brebeuf. They were healed. The church is a huge shrine. Over here. Come on. Yeah. He's like this when I'm walking. My dog is here. And at a certain point, he said, you've spoken enough. Time to stop. So he's my monitor in a way. Good. I wanted to mention him because my ancestors would always have dogs around. And, we're in the pandemic that we're in right now, dogs, and whether you've noticed, they become extremely important. People are getting dogs as pets like never before. Cats too, but mostly dogs. Because the dogs are very healing in our culture. Extremely healing. Just the presence of a dog is healing, but dogs are well known for licking wounds. And if that's very healing, even the ancient Greeks knew that. We knew that, and we wanted them around when we were sick, because they knew how to take care of it. And we know now there are dogs that can even detect cancer. But I mean, that's only a hint at why the dogs are important. And it's fitting that he should be here today when we're talking about the archetypal longhouse, because they are an essential part of the atmosphere and lifestyle inside the longhouse. Always dogs. Dogs, clan mothers, aunties, always cooking, the children, and by invitation, the men. The men cannot just go freely into a longhouse after what they've done. I've shown you what they went through that dystopic period. And we never forget it, what men are capable of. So when they go into the longhouse, they must be quiet. And if they're angry or they've come from a hunting party and they're filled with the scent of blood, we keep them out. We keep them out. Even hunting, they can't hunt for fun and then kill off animals without doing offerings. If they go out and kill rampantly, like some hunters do today, can't come into the longhouse. You're not welcome. And the women know. The women know the scent of blood. And when the man comes, no. That's how amazingly visceral the longhouse culture is. And I'm describing it to you. But the first longhouse is the landscape. Incredibly so. And I've shown you why it's the landscape. Then I'm showing the building that we built, an inspiration of the landscape. Now you know why I'm showing you this slide? You see that trowel? That is the trowel of the archaeologist. I worked with archaeologists to my own detriment, I have to say, but I was curious as an architect to see the floor plans of the longhouses. And I did. I saw them. I saw many of them. So I didn't have to guess how we lived. I saw the floor plan all laid out by the archaeologists. And I go, where are all the architects? Where are all the people who might be interested in how we lived our life? There were none. None came to visit, and I was the only native person at many sites in the 1990s. So I had the privilege of working with the colonizer, the settlers, who now have a science of archaeology to their credit. And, they're in the academy. I wasn't in the academy because I was just a native person of interest. But I knew what they were doing was important. And when I was through working with them, guess what? They gave me a trowel. I never used the trowel, but it was their symbol of respect. It was like a gift that native people and settlers often exchanged. A gift, they gave me a trowel. And you see here with the trowel in this case is a piece of pottery. And not only did they find the pattern of the longhouses and fires, but they found pottery and they found projectile points and tools all over southern Ontario. Mostly southern Ontario, because in New York State they don't have a very good program of archaeology. The fact is, it's discredited to a degree because, quite frankly, many Americans despise Native people. And New York State is a prime example. So you got to be very careful down there who you tell that you're Mohawk, because you might get a really bad reaction. It's like telling a white American that you're black. They don't like it. Even brown they don't like. But here in Ontario, we're not like that. We're a little better. I wouldn't say we have a long way to go, but we're going a long way, and this course is going a long way to healing this. It's so important. That's why I wanted to teach it 10 years ago, out of great love for the people. That was it. Oh. Then here you see an evocation of how the longhouses developed into these vast villages. This is the Draper site in southern Ontario, reconstructed. This is native urbanity. This is the size of a small town. Thousands of people. And a palisade around it and a beautiful lifestyle. And this isn't the only big village. There are many. What I have done in the past, and we still might do it in this class, we're going to bring in an archaeologist to speak to us in one of the lectures. My friend Rob MacDonald, who is one of the finest Iroquoian archaeologists in Ontario, and a dear friend of mine. And he will tell you the story from his scientific viewpoint. It's quite stunning because he loves Native people. I know he does. And his partner, Ron Williamson, also, whom I worked with for many years, loves Native people. I've seen him cry in meetings over the fate of Native people, and he's helpless. He's only an archaeologist. So there are friends, but I'll tell you, I made friends there, but then I was called in to the Six Nations Confederacy Council to explain to everybody why I was working with archaeologists, because they said, we don't dig things up, Bill. This is not right. I said, you know what? I'm not going there to dig up bones and disturb the remains of our ancestors. I'm going there as an architect. And believe me, you should look and see how our ancestors lived. It's stunning. It's beautiful. And it warms my heart to go to a fire pit 800 years old, and they can analyze what's in that fire pit and tell you what soup the people ate. They can even recreate it. That is the gift of archaeological, the archaeological science. It's when I explained this to the chiefs, and it was scary because they were ready to pounce on me, I heard them crying. I heard sobbing in the background. I said, "You're touched too by this, aren't you?" I said, "I'm not ashamed of what I've done. If I've opened you up to having some respect for these archaeologists, well, I'm grateful for it." Do you know what happened? This was like 20 years ago. The Six Nations now work with archaeologists directly because of my efforts to look at the plan of the Longhouse innocently as an architect. Now they work with archaeologists. And they don't give me any credit, but why should they? But I know I opened their eyes. And that's the power of the true storytelling. Here you see another painting of a Longhouse village. And one thing I like about this painting, it shows how integrated the whole atmosphere of the village is with the forest and the mountains and the sky. It's not separate. It's all woven together in a beautiful way. Then I end with this photograph. This photograph was taken in about 1910 of the Mohawk River before they put in the New York State Thruway. Just to show you the enduring power of the landscape and the Longhouse culture. Okay, so my dogs have been very patient, and I think it's time to bring this lecture to a close. In an upcoming lecture, we are going to actually talk about all of the processes around building the Longhouse, because we just don't go in there and start building. You have to find the site, and you have to find the measurements of it, and then you have to find the materials, and then you have to have the clan mothers come out and give you direction, and you have responsibilities as men to make the forms. We won't call it architect, but they call it something doctor of the building. So that's an upcoming lecture. So I think we'll bring this to a close today. So thank you very much. We say, Ona, I'm done.